Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Hans. So we're really going to dive in here and look at things from a customer engagement point of view. And I think if you look at the incredible technology enhancements and developments that we've seen in the last 12 or 18 months, I think all of us collectively in the room look at that and instinctively know this can change the way we operate.
So I think we instinctively know that we can really change the way we operate, but I'm sure many of you, like I am, really struggle to keep pace with the number of announcements that are being made, the number of this is the latest, greatest thing, this is the best model, this is the new one. And really, how do you turn that into action? And how do you change that into real life business value? How do you move from even those that are doing research projects or lab projects and those types of activity? How do you evolve from that mode of working in a more of a research or skunk works into deploying these capabilities into your mainstream businesses? And so what we're really going to do is we're going to spend the next 30 minutes, assuming Nasina can sort the slides out, which I'm sure she can. Thank you. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes really looking at how do you move beyond the hype? How do we take these fantastic technology developments and really turn those into deployable business value generating capabilities that are really helping our business move forward? We're focused at Verint on customer engagement, so we work with about 10,000 of the world's most iconic brands, really helping them deliver brilliant customer experiences. And what we're going to do really is take you through a customer experience focused view of the world, but we are going to make that a much broader discussion than just how do we automate conversations. We're going to look across the whole of the customer engagement conversation and really look at how AI and automation can be injected there. As mentioned, we've carried out some research, some global research. The research is available on our website, so you can download that, so you don't have to scribble down all the numbers if you see something interesting. But this was a global survey that we carried out. We surveyed senior management representatives with responsibility for customer engagement across their operation. We did this across all sizes of operations, from the smallest right up to the very largest. And we did it with a range of responsibilities. The range went from kind of director level responsible for customer engagement right up to C-level with overall responsibilities such as Chief Customer Officer. So let's dive in. The research was really focused on AI and automation and how do they see that influencing customer engagement going forward. And if we look at the first finding, we found that 99% of the leaders were focusing on delivering automation in the coming 12 months. And that was absolutely the number one area of their focus. There were a number of other choices, but delivering automation was their number one focus for nearly every single organization. And of those, 53% felt that AI will have the biggest impact in the next 12 months. Now, that I don't think is surprising, given the amount of hype and the amount of discussion there's been. Some would say too much. Some would say expectations maybe getting set a little high. But there's no, no other way of looking at it. It's not going away. The delivery of AI is not going away. And really, we have to embrace it. And as I say, 53% of the people in the survey recognise that as the number one activity they needed to focus on. But it wasn't just AI. Despite what you might believe if you look at press releases or the industry press, the leaders also had some other areas of focus, and one of these was digital channels at 23%. And this is really, we believe, being driven by the constant consumer demand to do more things over digital channels. I think if the question had actually been digital and social channels, that would have been even higher, because a lot of organisations really focusing on how do they interact on a one-to-one basis with people over social channels. Digital channels we've done fairly well now, but how do we move that into the social world? The next one, in terms of popularity was knowledge management. Knowledge management at 14%. And we really see that this knowledge source and curated knowledge remains incredibly important going forward. And that is because it can be surfaced in self-service bots, it can be surfaced on the website, it can be used by agents, but also it provides a fantastic source of information for large language models. It's a curated source that we know we can trust. So that remains incredibly important. And I think the one that may be a surprise is actually telephony for 10% of organizations. That is their focus in the coming year. How do they drive more services to be available through the phone channel? How do they improve the service that they're delivering on the phone channel? And again, consumer demand is still there despite what we might convince ourselves. Consumer demand is absolutely still there for delivering applications that can be accessed over the phone. So starting to look at some of the stats here, and I think what we see is people are absolutely open to AI and automation. But are we there? Are we delivering successfully? And 49%, so nearly half of organisations, don't feel they're delivering effective self-service on digital channels still. And that's despite all the work that we've all done over a number of years to deploy, improve and continuously improve, still nearly half of organisations think they need to do a better job in that area. 45% of organisations don't feel they're effective at using AI to augment the human workforce. And this is one of the themes that we're going to look at. How do you use AI to automate, but also how do you use it to augment the human workforce? And then finally, 37% don't feel that they're highly effective using AI to increase operational efficiency. And again, if you look at one of the key capabilities that AI should be giving us, it's making people more efficient and more effective. And again, we're going to come on and look at some examples here. Data is incredibly important for a number of reasons. I think if you look at the importance of data in training models, evolving models, but also measuring the effectiveness of models and the effectiveness as we continually improve those models. So data remains incredibly important, but 40% of organisations don't feel they've still broken down the silos between departments. And that can be for technology reasons, it can be for organisational reasons. But whatever it is, if we're not bringing all of that data together and using that holistically, then we're absolutely not getting the maximum benefit that we can have. 33% don't feel that they're using that data to really drive decisions in how they involve their customer experience and their customer engagement delivery. So a third of organisations not exploiting that data, and 24% of organisations still see they're having difficulty even getting insights from that data. And again, if you look at the press, you wouldn't believe that anyone struggles to do anything with data now. Every dashboard you could possibly want, every reporting tool, the insight tool that you can want are available. But organisations are still not feeling the benefit of all those technology advancements. So the question we asked then was, what technology are you struggling with? Where is technology not meeting your need? And in 60% of organisations, they told us that their agents that are handling contact centre engagement still are not able to handle multiple channels. So they're dedicated to voice or to email or to chat, and they don't have a fully blended workforce, which is incredible when we look at how much progress has been made. Organisations still haven't adopted to that level. 54%, particularly relevant in this type of audience, 54% of organisations still don't feel they've got effective self-service options that are satisfying customers. 45% lack support for digital channels. Managing spikes of activity, still a problem for 40% of organisations, and back on that data silo being reported again by organisations. So technology is still, despite how brilliant we may think it is and how well we've done in advancing, still not at the point where delivering for organisations everything that they need. And the last part of the research that we'll talk about here is we're talking about a feature gap. So we asked people, what was the importance of a particular item? What was their satisfaction with their current technology? And the difference between the two gives us a feature gap. So how important is something versus how good are you at it, really? And the number one item on here is using AI and automation and bots for self-service and for assisting humans in delivering their tasks within customer engagement. So that's still the number one area of concern where people think it's incredibly important, but we're still not there in terms of delivery. A number of other points there, integration. was important still, and still an area of struggle. Sharing data still an area of struggle. Dealing with spikes in traffic, we talked about still being a struggle. But also the last one, listening, analysing and acting on customer engagement data to drive forward improvements in CX. So I think certainly some real themes come through there from the research. As I say, you can download this from our website. Please feel free to go ahead and grab that information. And it's in the resource section. There's a lot of other information in there. So that's from a research point of view. But what about from customers' point of view? As I mentioned, we work with about 10,000 brands globally on delivering customer engagement. And what we're hearing from customers is life is tough. And life isn't getting easier. And there's really a number of drivers for that. And the first one is consumers. Consumers' expectations continue to grow every year. Consumers want to interact over more and more channels of their choice whenever it suits them. They want a highly personalised experience based on the relationship we have with the organisation. And those expectations just get higher and higher and higher every year. But we've also got challenges from the workforce, and the workforce is getting more and more demanding. And that can be work from anywhere. Yes, we transition to a work from anywhere environment where I can deliver customer interactions to you, but how do I keep you engaged? How do I keep you up to date? How do I keep you trained and knowledgeable on our latest solutions? But also, how do I make sure that you're feeling like you're responsible for delivering our brand to our customers? And so the workforce expectations continue to grow. Consumer expectations begin to grow, but guess what isn't growing? And that's budgets and resources. And organisations telling us that their growth in their budgets and their resources is very modest, if at all, sometimes remaining flat, some cases even reducing. And so what that leads us to is a gap between what you need to deliver and what you've actually got resources to deliver. And we refer to that as the engagement capacity gap. So the gap between what you need and what you have really opens up within an operation. And this remains over time and gets worse over time as those expectations continue to rise but resources don't. And we believe one of the keys to solving this is a hybrid workforce. And that's a hybrid workforce of people and automation working together to deliver that customer engagement. Why do we think automation is so important? It's driven by the largest single expense in engaging with customers, which is people. The estimate is there's about 50 million people working in customer engagement globally, with an average salary of around $40,000. So you put the two of those things together, and you end up with a labour bill of $2 trillion globally in managing customer engagement. So it's a phenomenal number. But actually, if you look at this from a technology point of view, actually the investments are pretty modest. The estimate is about 65 billion is spent on technology. And what we believe is brands can't hire their way out of this problem. You can't just keep throwing people at the customer engagement issue. And technology investments are key to making this different, and putting automation alongside people to collaboratively deliver customer engagement really is the way forward as we see it. AI and CX automation have got transformative potential. We're seeing the potential of technologies now to radically transform how we engage with customers. And I think we're really on the starting point of how that technology is going to be used to deliver experiences that wow customers, to deliver brilliant customer experience across all channels, but also to make people more effective and more efficient when people are delivering that service. So you look at this from a graphical point of view, we see the vast majority of the spend going on labour, and a very small slice, about 3% of the total spend, is going on technology. So what we believe is, with some strategic investments in technology, you can have a massive impact on the cost of delivering service. And then, even though there's been an increase in tech spending, there's a net reduction in the brand's overall spending on engaging with their customers. What that takes us forward to is this world where we move on from the past, which was people in big warehouses dotted around the country delivering customer engagement, to actually the world where you've got a combination of people and automation delivering that service. And that hybrid workforce may exist within the customer engagement, but it may also be in the back office, in the retail networks, in the branches of organisations, And overall, we need to consider that as one workforce across human and automated resources across the whole operation, wherever we touch engagement with customers. And we have that one workforce principle. Then we have to look at how do we make that one workforce as efficient as possible, and also how do we manage that one workforce across the operation. So where do we start is a common conversation, and really how do we get going? An interesting report from Forbes which says, people accept the capability of AI and they accept what it can do for them, but what they do struggle with is how do I get going and how do I start delivering? We're always being told, let's embrace and deploy the latest technology. And the example that we hear from customers is, the problem is AI has now hit the mainstream media. The CEOs at home at the weekend and they're reading the papers and they're seeing all this brilliant stuff that AI can do. And guess what? They come into work on Monday and shoot off an email to the leadership team saying, this AI stuff sounds good, can we have some? And guess what? Can I have your answer by Friday? What are you going to do to deploy it? And that drives completely the wrong conversation, which is a technology-focused decision, which is how do we take this technology and how do we get some deployed? And from our point of view, what we really do believe is this needs to be a business objective-driven discussion. And we've got to start at what's the business objective, what are we trying to achieve, how are we trying to improve the service, and then we look at what technologies are there to support it. And as I say, certainly the Forbes report refers to this, and we hear it repeatedly from customers. Our kind of response to that is really needs to focus on the customer engagement life cycle. And what we've got to do is look from start to finish how we're managing our customer engagement, and then look at how we can apply technology. And customer engagement starts before the customer's even involved. How do we predict the volume of interactions that we're going to get from customers based on what's happening? Weather conditions, market conditions, new product launches. How do we then move forward and make sure we're delivering brilliant self-service options? If self-service doesn't contain the interaction, how do we make sure we transition to an agent in the best possible way? How do we augment the agent and give the agent the best tools possible to do the best job in delivering that customer engagement? But then also after the customer interaction, how do we learn from that? How do we evolve our services? How do we look at what was said in those conversations and use that as the basis for delivering new services? So looking across that whole life cycle and saying, how do we apply AI and automation at each one of those steps? The way we've looked at this is, yes, we're a software company and a technology company, but we've actually taken a look at this from a business outcomes point of view. So we've looked at how technology can help deliver business workflows. And then we look at how we apply the technology to create those workflows. And what we've done, and again, I think one of the things we talked about earlier is the kind of lack of understanding within senior management of what AI and automation can do for them. And to try and help this, we package the capabilities up into what we call bots, which really are workflows. And what we're doing is we're giving each one of those bots one job to do and making sure it does it very well. And making sure the business outcomes and the return on investment from that workflow can be measured. And then making sure those bots can work together. So an organization might deploy 4 or 5 of these together to deliver an end-to-end process. But we're able to measure the ROI and the impact of each of those. Now, by taking that business workflow approach, what it means is, as the underlying AI engines change, and OpenAI's got a lot of press, but so is Claude now, and Llama is coming, and all of these things, we don't have to worry about that. What we worry about is the business solution that we're delivering to the customer. And then behind the scenes, we can look at flipping out different models. We can do A/B testing of those different models. We can ensure there's no bias, discrimination, and all of those things behind the scenes. And by changing the models, there's no impact on the business operation because they're still receiving the same workflow, albeit powered by a latest, greatest engine behind the scenes. So this concept of bots, we then apply across the customer life cycle. And as I said, this starts with the customer's choice of channels. We move through self-service, escalation up to an agent, delivering agent, augmentation, and then what happens when we finish the interaction. So I'll step through an example of what we can do at each stage of that life cycle.
based on deploying the latest AI and automation engines.
So, first of all, for self-service, probably the area most familiar to this audience, which is how do we deliver great self-service experiences. But the way that we've looked at this is we've looked at this from a customer engagement wide perspective. So when we deliver automation, we want to do it across every channel. So whether it's a digital chatbot, whether it's a social chatbot, whether it's over a voice channel, we want to build once and deploy across all those channels, across all of the languages that we need to support. And I want to do that based on integration into systems that we know we need to hit for transactional information that we build once and deploy across all those channels. We want to use knowledge as the source of information for bots, or one of the sources of information for bots. Why? Because that's curated and accurate information. We're not setting this bot free saying, go look for information about our company and replay that back to the customer. We're giving it curated knowledge as part of the training exercise. From a technology point of view, we have to do that based on natural language understanding, machine learning. We need to find the intent accurately. We have to be able to be flexible. So when misspelling, slang, new terminology is used, that we're evolving quickly. We're evolving quickly by taking customer engagement data, both from automated interactions, but as well as human interactions, and putting those together as the training population of data that really lets us rapidly train and evolve the bot capabilities to maximize containment. And we don't look at this from a deflection point of view. A lot of people talk about deflecting the customer away from the agents. We look at this as a containment exercise, which is how can we contain the customer in self-service and keep satisfying their needs, and how can we handle more and more complex interactions within that containment environment. But ultimately, we will get to the position where we need to get to other sources of information. And knowledge, as we say, underpins all of this. It can be a great source of information for self-service, whether that's on the website, whether that's in community applications, whether that's underpinning bot interactions. But it's also a great source of information still for agents, a great source of information out in your broader workforce. It could be field teams, branch teams, retail teams, kiosks in the retail environment. But overall, trying to take knowledge and deploying it through the whole of your technology ecosystem. Now, Gen AI is going to change knowledge management for certain. And we'll talk about some examples of how that already is happening. But the need for curated and accurate knowledge will not go away. And by feeding the large language models with information that we're confident on, that gives us a much higher chance of success than pointing those models at external information, for example. So we've reached the point where that interaction does use technology. And best practice has always been, when you escalate from automation across to an agent, tell the agent what's happened so far so you don't have to repeat yourself with customers. Shocking number of people still don't do that, but that's always been the best practice. The downside of that is when I'm an agent and I receive that transferred chat, for example, I've got to read through the transcription. So a great opportunity for us to apply Gen AI to summarize that interaction so far into a very easy to digest snippet for that agent. The agent can digest that immediately. They can be immediately productive with the customer. We still give them access to the transcripts if they need to check something. But this is a really efficient way of making an agent productive as soon as they receive that interaction, rather than the typical, okay, hold on, customer, just while I read what's happened so far, which really isn't effective for either me handling the interaction or for the customer. So a really positive way of helping that transition. But we go through the transition and we're now having a direct agent-to-customer conversation. How can we make that more effective? And one of the ways that we can do that is with our knowledge suggestion bot. And the principle here is listen to what's happening and deliver relevant, accurate information to agents in context with the conversation. How do we make it in context? We listen to the voice conversation. We watch the chat conversation. We see what's been happening on the desktop. We look what they're doing in their CRM application. And we take all of those things as clues into what's the best possible information we can surface to the agent to help make them as efficient as possible, and delivering suggested knowledge to the agent based on all those clues,
really effective way of doing things. But if you look at another knowledge example, what we'll often find in the real world is actually there are 3 or 4 knowledge articles that might help you here. And so what we've built is a knowledge results summary which will aggregate across all of those knowledge articles. So what it will do is, if you look at the typical example, is I've asked the question and I've got 4 different answers here from the knowledge management system. Again, a great opportunity for us to make this better by applying a Gen AI model there. And what it will do is it will aggregate the information from those different knowledge sources and provide one summarized knowledge article. Now, what we do is we make the original underlying articles still available, and I can go ahead and I can drill down and see the original information. If there appears to be some kind of hallucination or I'm just not clear on the detail, I can still get to that. But it makes people much more productive if we're able to summarize and aggregate those original 4 articles into one single article that they can read and be productive for the customer. So we've helped make agents better. And then if you look at the final step in the interaction, actually is how you wrap up the interaction. So typically in a contact center, agents will type up what happened in the conversation. It may take 45 or 60 seconds. And what we're able to do here is real-time transcription using natural language understanding and then summarize that in real time, present it back to the agent for them to review and approve, and then drop that into the CRM application. And that process of delivering the conversation summary to the agent and letting them drop that into the CRM application can shave 45 seconds off the whole of that interaction. Massive impact when you look at operations that are taking millions of calls a year. So that's from an agent point of view, but I also said we want to look at how we help beyond the agent. And that's where we look at the whole customer engagement lifecycle does actually go beyond when we're speaking to the customer. And you look at some of the other parts of the lifecycle where we can help other roles, such as the people who are designing services, the people who are analyzing the data, the people who are managing the teams, and how do we go ahead and make all of those different functions as productive as possible. So we do that by providing tools that help you constantly review the IVA service that you're delivering across channels. We do that by ensuring quality and compliance across all of the different channels, whether the human workforce or whether the automated workforce. And we saw an example earlier, and there's been many examples already of chatbots producing information that's inappropriate. How are we actually protecting ourselves from that happening? Knowledge article creation, how can we make that better? And then data, we talked a lot about data earlier. How can we establish conversations with data? And we'll look at that from a couple of perspectives. So I'll just go through these examples and show you. So the first one is, how do we make the self-service that you're offering better? And we do this by applying, again, AI models across all of the conversations. We're looking for the way you haven't found any intent. We're looking where you've misinterpreted an intent. We're looking at when escalation's happening. We're looking at then at speech analytics on the agent conversation to see what did the customer actually want in the case you misunderstood the intent or there was a missing intent. And how do we then use that to drive new services? We do that by using machine learning to surface up candidates for automation. But then that's where we look for human supervision to take over and actually make the decisions on which of these services do we want to deploy, what's the business priority, and so on. Quality and compliance, I think, is absolutely key here. And if you look at what's happened traditionally within a contact center, is all of the calls have been recorded, and about 1% of them on average are listened to by supervisors or QA analysts, and they're scored for accuracy, for completeness, for quality, and then that's how that's been carried out. Now, that was great 15 years ago, but we've got to look forward at what we do today, and we've got to expand that supervision across all channels, first of all, because if you're interacting over a digital channel, you could argue it's actually more important you're correct and accurate, because the customer now has a written record, which they never had in a phone call. But also, we need that same supervision when we're delivering with automation. How can we make sure that the accurate information is being delivered through self-service, and also that it's compliant information that we're delivering? Is the quality good for a customer's experience of that live interaction? but is the quality good of the automated interaction as well. So that multiplies up the number of interactions we need to look at, and what we've built are also scoring engines where you can look across all of the interactions and automatically score those. We've then introduced machine learning and semantic intelligence to say, I'm not looking for specific words and phrases. What I'm looking for was what was the conversation about, and what was the intent, and what was the accuracy of the information portrayed. And then the very latest iteration, we're actually using Gen AI to let you question the conversation and say, did the person give a great greeting? Was it compliant? And did it reflect our branding? And by asking conversation questions like that, you can actually surface conversations that you need to review, be they human or automated, rather than having to find specific words and phrases. So a big step forward in the number of conversations that we can check for compliance. We've got a customer in Australia that's now assessing 100% of their conversations for quality and compliance across human and automated conversations. Knowledge creation, I talked about the importance of knowledge, but building knowledge can be a long-winded process. Now, some would say, okay, well, why don't I just throw Gen AI at all of my company documentation, throw it at my website, and then wish it luck? We think you've got to go further than that. You've still got to have human supervision of authoring and editing and making sure information is compliant, up to date, and accurate. But we can use the models to make knowledge creation better. And this starts with an agent highlighting the need for knowledge, or a new process being introduced, or there's a trigger for us to create knowledge. And the knowledge author will find the source of knowledge, but often it's in enterprise information, which is potentially too long-winded to use for a knowledge article. It may be embedded within a much larger process document. But what we're able to do is have the knowledge author highlight the relevant information, send that off to the Gen AI model. The Gen AI does the authoring and the summarization of that content, and then brings it back to me as the author to do a final check, final edit, and publish that. And this can really accelerate the time from the knowledge need being highlighted to the new article being created. And then the final couple of examples are conversations with data. And if we look at the traditional way of building reports, it's find the data field, drag and drop from a long list into a column on a report. Hopefully you can remember how to build headers, footers, totals, subtotals, and all those things. And then you have your starting point for a report, which you then have to try and turn into a graphic. What we're actually using here is Gen AI to build reports for us. So in this example, I'm saying, what were the call volumes by intents? And it's going away and it's automatically generating that report for me. Other examples, what's the average handle time that we're experiencing versus what we forecast it to be? And using that natural language conversation, you can go away and build reporting that reflects what you need. It really democratizes the data and puts it back in the hands of the business rather than being locked away with analysts and data scientists. And then we're taking those powerful models behind the scenes and having them run across the data constantly, looking for anomalies, so something unusual is happening, looking for analogies, one thing happens when another thing happens, looking for trends in the data. And you don't have to be looking for those. It's going to surface up those things that need your attention, and you can then turn that into a natural language query of that data. So a real step forward in interpreting and making data usable. And the final one we'll look at here from an example point of view is how do you apply a conversational AI interface internally? And this is an example of a mobile application that was built for agents within the contact center operation. And what happens here, if it plays, there we go, is we're actually looking at, I played pretty quickly, didn't I? What that was showing was you're actually giving the agents an interface where they can do things like ask, where's my shift today? What's my shift events? What's my shifts in the coming week? What are my KPI performance? What's my KPI performance done month on month compared to last month? And giving the ability for people to unlock that type of data in a conversational and graphical driven conversation. And so a number of different ways that we're helping roles outside of the pure customer there. So how do we make automated conversations better? How do we check they're compliant? Right the way through to how do we give internal tools for people using conversational interfaces?
So overall, we come full circle, and what that brings us back to is that's why we think you need to look at the full life cycle of the customer interaction first of all, and where can you apply technology across that interaction. So we started off by saying, how do we harness the power of AI automation to deliver great customer experiences? Hopefully we've given some thoughts there and some ideas of how you can apply technology across the whole of that life cycle. I think we may have time for maybe one question, but I'm around for a couple of days on the Verint stand in the showcase area. Love to answer any questions. But in the meantime, thanks and have a great conference.